I wanted to talk about the third set of exercises, and I may not actually cover all of them in this lecture like I had planned. It took me a little bit longer to set up some examples of for each loops that I want to show you, along with how to do the hardest one in the set, which is the one that asks you to set up an array list of strings with town names in them and then delete with a for loop. So I'm going to focus on that last hardest exercise in this recording, and I'll have to do additional recording or recordings for the others which are easier. So we're going to talk about the hardest one because I want to show you a different looping style that you can use, and I want to address the significant problem that you run into with an array list when you're looping through it and randomly or according to some criteria you are removing elements from it. You can really run into some issues. So here in main, I have imported my array list so that I can set up an array list, and I'm just going to do one with strings. I'm going to add the names to it. Now, I changed the order a little bit. You don't have to do this. You can use the order that's in the write-up. But I wanted to make sure that you see one of the problems we're going to run into when we have two names that are less than 7 characters and they are back to back. We're going to have a slight problem with the remove and the array list. So I wanted to show you that, so I've rearranged them. Now I've got all of these in here, and if the name is less than 7 characters, I'm going to remove it using that nice remove method that the array list has. Now when I do that, when I remove this one from the array list, the first thing you need to realize is immediately the size of the array list changes. I start out with a size of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 elements, 8 items in this array list. So my size is 8, okay? The second I take one out, immediately it's not just blanking it out, it's actually removing it, and it's changing the size of the array, and it goes from 8 to 7 immediately when I remove the Y's element. Okay, so that's one issue. We're writing a loop, and now we were introducing this idea that the size is changing in the middle of the loop running. And when that happens, if you remember, when we talked about these, this is element 0, this is 1, this is 2, and so on. The second that I delete this one, I've got a problem because now this is item 1. But I'm in my loop and I'm getting ready to bump the loop counter up to 2, and I've not checked Floyd. Floyd has not been checked to see if it is less than 7 characters. So what happens in this scenario is I actually skip Floyd and I incorrectly leave it in the list, because you've got to think about this. When this one goes away, the loop counter is on 1. It checks to see that that's less than 7. It deletes it. This one becomes position 1. It's the second element now when Y's is deleted. The loop is not smart enough to say, oh, the element is now changed from Y's to Floyd, and now I need to check Floyd. The loop's not that smart. The loop says I checked Y's, it was less than 7, I deleted it. My loop counter is going to go up 1 to 2. Now I'm going to check element 2. Is it less than 7? Well, now Buchanan is 2. So I have totally skipped Floyd. So that's why this one is important for you to understand how this works. Not only does the size change, when I remove something, it renumbers all the subsequent elements. Their index numbers change afterwards, and that can cause us some issues. So let's talk about a couple of things here, how we can address this. So first of all, I just wanted to show you Here's a for loop that you're used to seeing that's going to print all the elements out, starting at the first one, going to the end. It is simply going to print them out using the get method that ArrayList has. Notice it would be acceptable here if I have 8 elements, right? I could put an 8 in there if I know for sure that I have 8 elements. But it is much better to get in the habit of using less than the array name dot size, because on the AP exam they are not going to tell you this array has 8 elements. They're going to say you have an array that has a length or a size of n, with n being an integer greater than 0, meaning that the size of the array could be anywhere from 1 to a million trillion, okay? So they're not going to give you that easy of a problem. You're going to have to get used to using this less than size in order to get the loop to go from beginning to end. So that's what I've done here. That will print out all of these very nicely, and I put some characters in there so we could split up the output a little bit. The other thing before we get into the whole remove problem that I wanted to show you is that when you're dealing with arrays or array lists, you can take a shortcut with what we call a for each loop. When you are dealing with arrays or array lists only, don't use this for other things. This is for collections, for these types of special things that allow us to put multiple values in them, arrays and array lists. So we can take a shortcut. For one, this is a shorter loop. Notice how much less code you have than the loop above it, okay? And two, notice how I don't have to worry about dot size or less than 8 or whatever. I do not have to worry about the size when I write this array. Java will take care of that for me. So it still uses the keyword for, and in parentheses, now this is a little tricky and you just kind of have to remember this format. If the array list is made up of strings, this sort of becomes your loop counter variable here, just like I up here. But notice, if the array list is made up of strings, I put string, not int here, okay? Whatever this is kind of like a quasi loop counter, but it takes the same data type as the array or array list. So if it's an array or array list of strings, I put string here. If it's an array of integers, I put int. If it's an array list of integers, I put capital INTEGER here. So whatever data type the array or array list has goes here. Then you can use whatever you want here. You can use the letter I, you can use XYZ, you can use any name. This is sort of like your loop counter. Then you put a colon, then you put the name of the array or array list here, okay? And what that says, for each element I in the names array list, do something, print it out basically. So that's the way we read it. For each element I in the array list names, do whatever, print it out, total it up, whatever you're going to do with it. Now notice this loop is pretty simple. I don't have to worry about the size of the array. I don't have to do this I equals 0, I plus plus. I don't have to do any of that. And notice here, what I put in the print line is this I, this quasi counter. I don't put names.getI. I put I, when I'm dealing with an array list, I'm going to put the letter I there. And if I had named it XYZ instead of I would put XYZ right here, okay? So this is called a for each loop. It's a little shorter and you don't have to worry about the whole size or length of an array, size of an array list. But notice you pretty much can only go from beginning to end, and you pretty much have to use it to deal with every element in the array. So if I'm going to try to skip randomly through the array, this is probably not going to work as well for me as an array, as a for loop here, where I can actually control the counter a little bit, okay? But most of the time you are going from beginning to end doing something with every element, and if that's the case, this loop will work pretty well. So I've got that in here so you can see that format. You will see that on the AP exam. You need to be familiar with it. You need to use it some. So here I'm just showing you again how to print out every element in the array, okay, or array list, excuse me, using a for each loop. Then I came down and I'm going to run this and walk through the output. Here's the way you might think you should solve the problem of removing Wise and Floyd from the array list. Write your loop. Notice I can do names.getI, and since that's a string, that brings back the string Wise or Floyd or Richmond. Then, because that's a string, I can do dot link to see if that value is less than 7 or not. If it is, I can use the remove to remove that element from the array list. And we're going to look at the output here, and we're going to see that it's going to skip Floyd. All right. So let's run it really quickly. Here is where I printed it out using a traditional for loop to verify for you that everything was in there. Here's where I printed out the names array list using the modified for each loop. Again, I haven't removed anything yet. I'm just proving to you that I have everything in the array and that I can use two different loop styles to print everything out. Now here is where I basically said go through the loop and remove everything that's less than 7. It looked at Radford. If you remember, the second element was Wise, W-I-S-E. So my loop counter is a 1. I go to the second element, which has an index number of 1. The length is less than 7 because Wise has fewer than 7 letters in it, and it removes it. Now Floyd is moved up to the second position, index of 1, which is what I'm on. But this loop is not built to go back and check what's been moved up. It just says, hey, I removed Wise. I'm done with the element that had an index number of 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Now I'm going on to 2. Well, 2 is Buchanan now. It's not Floyd. Floyd never gets checked. It gets skipped. And now my output is technically not correct. Okay. So that's what I wanted to show you with this loop. Now I've just removed everything, and here again I used that nice format to print it out to prove to you that Wise was removed but Floyd got skipped. So we have to think of a workaround for that. So if you try to put an if statement here in this nice shorter loop, you try to do something like this. This doesn't quite work in this loop. So then you might think, well, I could do like names.getI. I could check that out. The problem is, remember, this isn't really an integer. It's declared with the same data type as the array list as a string. So we can't really leverage off of that like you might think here, and that's because of the way this for each loop works. It's a little unsophisticated. So how am I going to remove that from the list and still make sure I don't skip Floyd? Okay. Well, I have to be a little tricky, and I'm going to comment this one out. I'm going to be a little tricky here. I'm going to use a traditional for loop. Here's my if statement, which is the same. Remove Wise from the list, but then back that counter up. Even though I don't like to do this, we're going to manipulate that loop counter within the loop, because right now it's at 1. It gets Wise, it pulls it out of the list, and if I back it back to 0 right here, it becomes 0. 0 plus 1 is 1, which is Floyd. So you see, you have to be a little tricky on that one. You have to think about what it's doing. When it gets rid of Wise and Floyd becomes position